The church bell rang 3 times, the signal that never came on her wedding day. Sarah Brennan stood frozen in the doorway of the small wooden chapel, her ivory dress now dust-stained and torn at the hem. Through the open doors she could see the entire town of Redemption gathered in the square, whispering behind gloved hands. Her father's hand gripped her elbow like a vice as he dragged her down the steps, her carefully pinned hair coming loose in dark waves around her shoulders. "Ungrateful girl," he hissed, loud enough for the nearest townspeople to hear. "Chasing after that gambler, bringing shame to our family name. You'll marry Wallace Tucker today, or you'll find yourself with nothing. Not a cent, not a roof, nothing." But Sarah's eyes weren't on her father. They were fixed on the spot beneath the church bell, where Thomas Whitfield, the man she'd loved since childhood, the man who'd promised to meet her at dawn to elope, stood with his arm around another woman. Margaret Henshaw, the banker's daughter, wearing the same triumphant smile she'd worn since they were children, competing for top marks in the schoolhouse. Thomas wouldn't meet her eyes. Before we continue with Sarah's story, I'd love to ask a small favor. If you're enjoying this tale, please take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. It truly helps us bring you more quality stories like this one. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments. "The arrangement is made," her father continued, shoving her toward a waiting carriage. "Tucker's paid a handsome bride price. You'll learn to be grateful." Sarah's stomach turned. Wallace Tucker was 53 years old, owned half the mining operations in the territory, and had buried 2 wives already, both dead under mysterious circumstances that the sheriff never quite investigated. She'd seen the bruises on his last wife's arms at the general store, seen the fear in the woman's eyes. The carriage lurched forward, taking her away from the town, away from her shattered dreams, toward Tucker's ranch in the foothills. Sarah's fingers found the small gold locket around her neck, her mother's locket, the only thing of value she owned. Her mother, who died when Sarah was 12, who told her to be brave, to never let anyone break her spirit. "Be brave, Mama," she thought. But how? The sun was setting by the time the carriage reached the fork in the road where Tucker's ranch lay to the east. Sarah's father had fallen asleep, his snoring filling the small space. The driver, a thin man named Perkins, seemed uncomfortable with his task, his eyes constantly darting to the rear-view mirror, where Sarah sat with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Miss Brennan," Perkins said quietly, "I got a daughter about your age. I wouldn't." He pulled the horses to a stop. "There's a trail north through those pines, leads to the high country. If you run now, I'll tell your father you jumped out while I was changing a wheel." Sarah stared at him, hope and terror warring in her chest. "He'll punish you." "Let him try." Perkins' weathered face was kind. "I've got sins enough on my conscience. I won't add your suffering to them. Go on now. Run." Sarah didn't wait for him to change his mind. She gathered her skirts and jumped from the carriage, stumbling on the rocky ground before finding her footing. Behind her, Perkins shouted a curse for show, and she heard her father's angry voice rising. She ran. The pine forest swallowed her quickly, the shadows deepening as night fell. Sarah's fine wedding shoes, purchased specially for a ceremony that never happened, were never meant for running through wilderness. Within an hour, her feet were bleeding, her dress caught and torn by brambles, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stop. The temperature dropped as she climbed higher, and Sarah realized with growing dread that she had no supplies, no food, no warm clothing. The thin shawl over her shoulders did nothing against the mountain cold. When she finally collapsed beside a fallen log, her legs simply refused to carry her further. "This is how I die," she thought, pulling her mother's locket from her neck and holding it in her palm. Alone in the wilderness, free but starving. Maybe that's better than the alternative. She must have dozed, because she woke to the sound of footsteps crunching through pine needles. Sarah scrambled upright, her heart hammering. A massive figure emerged from the darkness. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with long dark hair tied back, and a thick beard covering the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy coat lined with fur, and a rifle rested easily in the crook of his arm. A mountain man. She'd heard stories about them, men who lived in the high country, trapping and hunting, rarely coming down to civilization. Some said they were more savage than civilized, that they took what they wanted without asking. Sarah tried to stand, but her legs buckled. The man moved forward, and she held up her mother's locket like a shield. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I have this. It's gold, real gold. It was my mother's. You can have it if you just let me rest here until morning. I'll go then. I promise I won't tell anyone where you are." The man stopped, his dark eyes studying her in the moonlight that filtered through the pines. They were startling eyes, deep brown, almost black, but surprisingly gentle for such a harsh face. He looked at the locket, then back at her torn dress, her bleeding feet, her desperate expression. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough, like gravel underfoot. "Gold isn't what we need here. You are." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" He knelt slowly, keeping his movements careful, non-threatening. This close, she could see the details of his face, the weathered skin, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the silver threading through his dark beard. He had to be in his early 30s, she guessed, but his eyes held the weight of someone who'd lived much longer. "You're hurt," he said simply. "You're cold. You're running from something bad enough that you'd rather die in these mountains than go back to it." He gestured to her torn wedding dress. "I'm guessing a husband you didn't choose." Sarah's hand tightened on the locket. "How did you—" "I know what desperation looks like." He slowly removed his heavy fur-lined coat and held it out to her. "My name's Daniel Cross. I have a cabin about a mile north. It's warm. There's food. You can rest there, and in the morning, you can tell me where you need to go." "I have nowhere to go," Sarah admitted, the words breaking something inside her. "I have nothing." "Then you can stay as long as you need." Daniel's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. "I won't hurt you. I give you my word on that." Sarah wanted to trust him. She wanted it so desperately that it frightened her. But Thomas had made promises too, and her father, and look where that had led. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I had a sister once, Mary. She was forced into a marriage she didn't want down in Kansas. Her husband—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "She died trying to run, just like you're doing. Fell through ice on a river in winter. They found her 3 days later." The pain in his voice was raw, real. Sarah recognized it because she carried her own grief, for her mother, for the life she'd imagined, for the man she'd thought loved her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "So am I." Daniel stood, and laid the coat on the log beside her. "You can trust me or not, that's your choice, but you'll freeze to death out here in that dress, and I'm not going to let that happen if I can prevent it. So you can come with me to the cabin, or I'll build a fire here and sit up all night making sure you don't die of cold. Your choice." There was something in his straightforward manner, in the lath of smooth words or false charm, that made Sarah believe him. Or maybe she was just too exhausted to care anymore. She put the locket back around her neck and reached for his coat. It was still warm from his body and smelled of pine smoke and leather. When she wrapped it around herself, it swallowed her small frame entirely. "I can't walk," she admitted, looking at her ruined feet. Daniel didn't hesitate. He shifted his rifle to his back and bent down. "May I?" The fact that he asked, that he waited for her nod before scooping her up in his arms, as if she weighed nothing, meant more to Sarah than any pretty words could have. As he carried her through the dark forest, Sarah rested her head against his broad chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time since standing in that church doorway, she felt something other than terror. She felt the possibility of safety. Daniel's cabin appeared in a clearing, solid and well-built from hewn logs, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. He pushed open the door with his shoulder and carried her inside, setting her carefully in a chair near the fireplace. The interior was simple but clean. A large bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, furs drying on racks. A pot hung over the fire, and the smell of venison stew made Sarah's empty stomach clench with hunger. "When did you last eat?" Daniel asked, moving to stir the pot. "Yesterday morning." It felt like a lifetime ago. He ladled stew into a wooden bowl and brought it to her, along with a piece of hard bread. "Go slow. Your stomach isn't used to being empty." Sarah's hands shook as she took the bowl. The first bite of warm food brought tears to her eyes. She tried to eat slowly as he'd instructed, but hunger made her reckless. Daniel watched her with those dark, careful eyes, then turned his attention to gathering supplies. He filled a basin with warm water from a kettle by the fire and knelt in front of her chair. "Your feet need tending." Sarah pulled back instinctively. "I can do it." "I'm sure you can." His voice was patient. "But they're in bad shape, and you've been through enough today. Let me help." There was no demand in his words, only an offer. Sarah slowly extended her bleeding feet, and Daniel began cleaning them with gentle hands that seemed too large for such delicate work. His touch was clinical, efficient, but there was a carefulness to it that made her throat tight. "You'll need proper boots," he said, wrapping her feet in clean cloth. "I've got an extra pair that might fit with thick socks. And you can't stay in that dress. I'll find you something warmer." The reality of her situation crashed over Sarah. She was alone in a mountain cabin with a strange man, wearing his coat, eating his food, completely at his mercy. By all rights, she should be terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked. Daniel sat back on his heels, his work finished. "Same reason you ran into these mountains. Sometimes civilization doesn't have room for people like us." "What does that mean?" "It means I didn't fit the mold they wanted." He stood and moved to a chest, pulling out a flannel shirt and wool pants. "I was a scout for the army, years back. Saw things I didn't agree with, said so, and got labeled a sympathizer for my trouble. Came up here after my sister died. Been here 5 years now." He handed her the clothes and turned his back, giving her privacy. Sarah changed quickly, her fingers clumsy with exhaustion. The clothes hung loose on her smaller frame, but they were warm and practical. "You can take the bed," Daniel said, still facing away. "I'll sleep by the fire." "I can't take your bed." "Yes, you can." He finally turned, and Sarah saw a flash of something fierce in his expression. "You've been hurt enough today. I'm not going to add to it by making you sleep on the floor." Sarah was too tired to argue. She climbed into the bed, which smelled of pine and leather and something uniquely Daniel, and pulled the heavy furs over herself. Within moments, exhaustion dragged her under. She woke once in the deep night, disoriented and gasping from a nightmare where her father's hands closed around her throat. Daniel was there instantly, crouching beside the bed, his presence solid and real. "You're safe," he said quietly. "Just a dream." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I'm a light sleeper." He stood, but didn't move away. "Bad dreams? My father, and Thomas, the man who betrayed me." Sarah's voice broke. "He promised to marry me. We were supposed to run away together at dawn. Instead, he was with another woman, and my father tried to force me to marry." She couldn't finish. "Wallace Tucker," Daniel said grimly. "I've heard of him. Mean son of a bitch who thinks money buys him the right to anything he wants. You know him?" "Know of him. His mining operations scar these mountains." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He won't find you here. No one knows about this cabin except me. My father will look for me. He's not a man who lets go of things easily. Then we'll deal with that when it comes." Daniel's voice held absolute certainty. "But you're safe tonight. Sleep." Sarah wanted to believe him. As she drifted back to sleep, she realized that for the first time in her life, she was making a choice to trust, to stay, to accept help. It terrified her almost as much as running had. The next morning, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Daniel stood at the stove, his broad back to her, working with efficient movements. He'd tied his hair back, and she could see the strong line of his neck, the way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt. "Morning," he said without turning. "Coffee's ready." Sarah sat up, wincing at her sore muscles. Everything hurt, her feet, her legs, her heart. She wrapped one of the furs around herself and moved to the table, accepting the tin cup of coffee Daniel offered. "How did you know I was awake?" she asked. "Your breathing changed." He set a plate of bacon and eggs in front of her. "Eat, then we'll talk about what comes next." "What if I don't know what comes next?" Daniel sat across from her, his own plate untouched. "Then you stay here until you figure it out. I meant what I said last night. You can stay as long as you need." "Why would you do that? You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not." He took a sip of his coffee, his dark eyes studying her. "But I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. And I know what it's like to watch someone suffer who didn't deserve it. If I can prevent that from happening again, I will." There was a weight to his words that made Sarah's chest tight. "Your sister, Mary, she was 19 when she died. Sweet girl, always laughing. She wanted to be a teacher." Daniel's expression went distant. "Her husband said she was clumsy, that she'd fallen into the river by accident. But I saw the bruises on her arms at the funeral. I knew what he'd done. What happened to him? I'd like to say justice was served, but it wasn't." Daniel's voice went flat. "I would have ended up like his other wives, dead and forgotten." "But you didn't marry him." Daniel's gaze held hers. "You ran. You chose to fight. That takes courage." "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like cowardice." "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. He stood and began clearing the dishes. Now, you need better clothes and proper boots. I'll ride down to a trading post I know. It's a day's journey. The woman who runs it is discreet, won't ask questions. I'll get you what you need. You're leaving? Panic flared in Sarah's chest. Only for 2 days, today and tomorrow. I'll be back by nightfall the day after. Daniel must have seen her fear, because his expression softened. No one knows about this cabin, Sarah. You'll be safe here. The door bars from the inside, and there's a rifle on the wall. It's loaded, and I'll show you how to use it before I go. Sarah wanted to argue, to beg him not to leave her alone, but she swallowed the words. She'd chosen to run, chosen to trust this man. She couldn't become a burden now. All right, she said quietly. Thank you. Daniel taught her how to load and fire the rifle, his patience infinite as she fumbled with the unfamiliar weapon. He showed her where he kept extra supplies, how to bank the fire for the night, where the emergency cache of food was hidden beneath a floorboard. If anyone comes, anyone at all, you hide in the root cellar under the rug in the corner. He pointed to a woven rug near the bed. There's a latch. Don't come out until you hear my voice saying your name 3 times. Understand? 3 times, Sarah repeated. Daniel, what if my father... He won't find you here. Daniel's voice was absolute. But if he does, you don't engage. You hide and you wait for me. He left just after noon, his horse loaded with furs to trade. Sarah stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching until he disappeared into the trees, fighting the urge to call him back. Then she was alone. The silence of the mountains was different from any quiet Sarah had known. In town, there was always noise, wagons, voices, animals. Here the world seemed to hold its breath between the whisper of wind through pines and the distant cry of an eagle. Sarah spent the first day organizing the cabin, a need to feel useful driving her. She swept the floor, organized the shelves, mended a tear in one of Daniel's shirts that she found hanging on a peg. It felt strange, domestic, this caretaking of a stranger's space. But it also felt right somehow. That night, alone in the cabin with only the fire for company, Sarah allowed herself to feel everything she'd been holding back. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the betrayal of a man she'd loved, for the mother who couldn't save her, for the fear that still lived in her bones. When the tears finally stopped, she felt lighter, emptier, but cleaner somehow. The second day, Sarah explored the area immediately around the cabin. There was a stream nearby, crystal clear and icy cold. She found wild herbs growing along its banks, mint and sage. She picked some, remembering her mother teaching her about plants that could flavor food or make medicine. As the sun began to set on the second evening, Sarah found herself watching the tree line anxiously. Daniel had said he'd return by nightfall. What if something had happened? What if he'd changed his mind about helping her? Stop it, she told herself firmly. He'll come back. But as darkness fell and there was no sign of him, fear crept in. Sarah barred the door and sat by the fire with the rifle across her lap, every sound making her jump. The knock came just after full dark, 3 sharp raps that made her heart leap into her throat. Sarah, Daniel's voice called through the door. Sarah, Sarah, 3 times. She fumbled with the bar and pulled the door open. Daniel stood there with his horse, looking tired but unharmed, saddlebags bulging with supplies. You came back, she said, hating how her voice shook. I said I would. He led his horse to the small lean-to beside the cabin and began unloading. "Did you think I wouldn't? I didn't know what to think." Daniel carried the supplies inside, and Sarah saw that he'd brought not just necessities, but thoughtful additions. A warm wool dress in deep blue that would actually fit her, sturdy leather boots, a brush for her hair, even a small bar of lavender soap. "The trading post woman helped," he admitted, looking uncomfortable. "I'm not good at knowing what women need." Sarah picked up the soap and brought it to her nose, inhaling the familiar scent. Her mother had loved lavender. Tears pricked her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. "All of it. Thank you." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Daniel taught Sarah the skills she'd need to survive in the mountains: how to read animal tracks, how to identify edible plants, how to move quietly through the forest. She proved a quick learner, her desperation to be useful driving her to master each lesson. In turn, Sarah took over the cooking and mending, tasks Daniel clearly viewed as necessary chores rather than anything approaching pleasure. She experimented with the herbs she'd found, making the simple meals of venison and rabbit more flavorful. She noticed Daniel's surprised expression the first time he tasted stew seasoned with sage and wild onions. "My mother taught me," Sarah explained. "She said even hard times taste better with the right herbs." She was a wise woman. She was. Sarah stirred the pot, her throat tight. "She died of fever when I was 12. My father changed after that. Became harder. Started drinking more." "Is that when he started hurting you?" Sarah's hands stilled. She hadn't told Daniel about the bruises, the harsh words, the times she'd hidden in the stable to avoid her father's temper. "How did you know?" "The way you flinch sometimes when I move too fast. The way you apologize for things that don't need apologizing for." Daniel's voice was gentle. "I've seen it before." Sarah set down the spoon and turned to face him. "My father never hit me. He didn't have to. His words were enough. He told me I was worthless, that no man would want me, that I should be grateful Wallace Tucker was willing to pay for damaged goods." "Your father's a fool." The words came out flat, absolute. "You're not damaged. You're not goods. You're a person. A strong, brave person who chose freedom over safety." Something shifted in Sarah's chest. She'd been called many things in her life: ungrateful, difficult, plain, disappointing, but never strong, never brave. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel broken. Broken things can heal." Daniel stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "I was broken when I came here, angry, bitter, ready to hate the whole world for what happened to Mary. These mountains healed me, slowly but they did. How long did it take? I'll let you know when it's finished." He turned back to her, a slight smile on his bearded face. "Healing isn't a destination, Sarah. It's a journey. You just have to keep walking." Winter came early to the high country. Sarah woke one morning to find snow falling softly outside the cabin windows, transforming the world into something clean and new. Daniel was already up, feeding logs into the fire. "We'll be snowed in soon," he said. "Probably until spring. Can you handle being stuck here with me for that long?" The question should have frightened her, but instead, Sarah felt only relief. Here, in this cabin with this quiet man, she felt safer than she had in years. "Yes," she said simply, "I can handle that." They settled into the rhythm of winter. Daniel chopped wood and checked his trap lines, coming back with rabbits and the occasional deer. Sarah kept the cabin warm and the food prepared, and in the evenings, they talked, long conversations by firelight about everything and nothing. Sarah learned that Daniel had taught himself to read from newspapers and books salvaged from abandoned homesteads. He'd never been to school, but he had a sharp mind and a hunger for knowledge. She found herself telling him about the books she'd loved as a girl, the poetry her mother had read to her, the dreams she'd once had of seeing the ocean. "Why didn't you?" Daniel asked one night. "See the ocean?" "Women don't just leave," Sarah said. "Not in my world. Not without a husband or family to accompany them. And my father—" She stopped. "He needed me, or he said he did. I took care of the house, managed his accounts. He said I owed him that much." "You didn't owe him anything." Daniel's voice was firm. "Parents are supposed to care for their children, not the other way around." "Is that how it was for you?" Daniel's expression darkened. "My father was a drunk who beat my mother until she stopped fighting back. Then he beat me and Mary. I left home at 14, joined the army at 16 by lying about my age. Mary wasn't as lucky." Sarah reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. It was the first time she'd deliberately touched him, and she felt him go still. His hand was rough, scarred, huge compared to hers, but it didn't frighten her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Daniel looked down at their joined hands for a long moment, then gently squeezed her fingers. "Me too." Something changed between them that night. The careful distance they'd maintained began to dissolve. Sarah found herself noticing things about Daniel she'd tried to ignore. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his rough hands, the patience he showed when teaching her new skills. And sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. One afternoon, Sarah was practicing with the rifle outside the cabin, aiming at targets Daniel had set up. She'd gotten better, could hit the center mark more often than not. But she was thinking about other things, about Thomas, about the church bell, about the life that had shattered beneath her feet. And her shot went wild. "You're distracted," Daniel said from behind her. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." He moved closer, standing just behind her. "Your stance is off. Here." His hands settled on her shoulders, adjusting her position. Feet shoulder-width apart. Breathe slow. Don't think about anything except the target. But Sarah couldn't think about the target, with Daniel's solid warmth at her back, his breath stirring the hair at her temple. Her heart was beating too fast, and it had nothing to do with the rifle in her hands. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Yeah?" "I think I'm healed enough to admit something." His hands stilled on her shoulders. "What's that?" Sarah lowered the rifle and turned to face him. They were close. Closer than they'd been since that first night when he carried her through the forest. She could see every detail of his face, the gray in his beard, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the way his dark eyes had gone soft. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said. Daniel went very still. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought she'd made a mistake, that she'd ruined everything. Then his hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I was waiting for you to realize it," he said, his voice rough. "Because I've been in love with you since you offered me your mother's locket, for a night's shelter, like gold was worth more than a life." Sarah's breath caught. "You have?" "Yeah." His other hand came up to frame her face, and Sarah had never felt more precious in her life. "But I was waiting. You've been hurt too much, and I needed you to be sure. To choose this, choose me, because you wanted to. Not because you had nowhere else to go." "I'm sure," Sarah whispered. I'm choosing you. Daniel bent his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle, reverent, nothing like the few stolen kisses she'd shared with Thomas. Those had been hasty, furtive things. This was a promise. When they finally broke apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I'll die before I hurt you, he said quietly. I swear it on Mary's memory. You're safe with me. I know. And Sarah realized it was true. She did know. I've known for a while now. They stood there in the snow, holding each other, until the cold finally drove them back inside. That night, Sarah didn't sleep in the bed alone. Daniel held her against his chest, and she listened to his heartbeat and felt something she'd never expected to feel again. Hope. Winter deepened, and with it, their love grew. They were careful with each other, learning the landscape of intimacy one small step at a time. Sarah discovered that Daniel was patient in all things, never pushing, always waiting for her to set the pace. One night, as they lay together in the darkness, Sarah traced the scars on his chest, evidence of battles and hardships she could only imagine. Do they hurt? She asked. Not anymore. His hand covered hers, holding it over his heart. Not when you touch them. Sarah propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at his shadowed face. I want... She stopped, uncertain how to ask for what she wanted. What do you want? Daniel's voice was patient. You. All of you. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. But I've never... I know. He sat up carefully, pulling her into his lap, so she was straddling him, their faces level. And we have time. All the time in the world. There's no rush. But there was urgency in the way Sarah kissed him, in the way her hands fisted in his hair. She'd spent so long afraid, so long denying herself anything that felt good. Now, with Daniel, she wanted to claim every piece of joy she could. Go slow, she whispered against his mouth. It hurts sometimes, remembering. I'll die before I hurt you, Daniel said again, his hands gentle on her waist. We go at your pace, always. They took their time, learning each other by firelight, discovering that intimacy could be tender and sacred and whole. When Sarah finally fell asleep, sated and safe in Daniel's arms, she thought of all the times she'd prayed for rescue. She'd never imagined rescue could look like this, like a bearded mountain man with gentle hands and a fierce heart, like a cabin in the wilderness where she could finally breathe. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it arrived, it transformed the landscape into something breathtaking. Sarah had never seen so many wildflowers, never breathed air so clean. She'd gained weight over the winter, her body filling out with proper food and safety. Her hands, once soft from town living, had grown strong from work. She was different now, not the frightened girl who'd fled in a torn wedding dress, but someone new, someone forged by winter and love and survival. One morning, Daniel woke her with a kiss and a serious expression. We need to talk, he said. Fear spiked through Sarah. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. But spring means the passes will open soon. People will start moving through the mountains again. Your father might still be looking for you. Tucker might have hired men to search. Sarah's stomach clenched. She'd almost forgotten about the world below, about the people who'd wanted to own her. What do? We have choices. Daniel's thumb traced circles on her palm. "We can stay here, keep hiding, or we can go down to one of the settlements, start fresh somewhere new. Or," he paused, "or I can make an honest woman of you." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me." Daniel's dark eyes held hers. "I know I'm not what you probably dreamed of. I'm not educated or refined or any of those things. But I love you, Sarah. I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just hiding." Tears blurred Sarah's vision. "You want to marry me?" "I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build a bigger cabin, maybe have children if you want them. I want to grow old with you in these mountains." His voice roughened. "I want you to be mine, and I want to be yours. Together, together," Sarah repeated, the word tasting like home. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Daniel pulled her into his arms, and Sarah felt the tremor that ran through his big body. "I was terrified you'd say no." "Never." She pulled back to look at him. "But Daniel, what about my father? What about Tucker? They'll try to stop us." "Let them try." Daniel's expression went hard. "You're not property. You're not for sale. If they want to challenge that, they'll have to go through me." 2 weeks later, they rode down to a small settlement 3 days' journey from the cabin. Sarah wore her blue wool dress and the gold locket, and Daniel had trimmed his beard and braided his hair. They were married by a traveling preacher in front of a handful of witnesses who didn't ask questions. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Sarah held her breath. But the church was empty of threats, empty of her father's anger or Tucker's money. There was only Daniel, looking at her like she was something precious, and the promise of a life built on choice rather than obligation. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said. Daniel cupped Sarah's face and kissed her in front of God and witnesses, claiming her not as property, but as partner. When they broke apart, Sarah was crying, but they were joyful tears. They spent their wedding night in the settlement's small inn, and when Daniel carried her over the threshold, Sarah laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time since that terrible day beneath the church bell. "What's funny?" Daniel asked, setting her down gently. "I was so terrified of marriage," Sarah said, "of being owned, being trapped. And now here I am, married, and I've never felt more free." "That's because you chose it." Daniel kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You chose me. Makes all the difference." They stayed in the settlement for a week, during which Daniel registered a claim for his land and made their marriage official in the territory's records. He also asked around discreetly about Wallace Tucker and Sarah's father. "Tucker's moved on," he reported one evening, "married some girl from Denver. And your father," he hesitated. "He drank himself to death 3 months ago. I'm sorry." Sarah felt a complex swirl of emotions: relief, sadness, guilt, freedom. "I should feel something more," she said, "but mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal." Daniel pulled her close. "He was your father, but he wasn't a good man. You're allowed to feel however you feel." They rode back to the cabin a week later, and Sarah realized that at some point during the winter, this remote place had become home. Not the cabin itself, but the life they'd built inside it. The rhythm of their days, the quiet understanding between them, the love that grew stronger with each passing season. That summer, Sarah planted a garden near the cabin, vegetables and herbs, and a section of wildflowers that she tended with the same care her mother had shown her gardens. She taught Daniel to read better, and he taught her to track deer. They talked about building a bigger cabin, maybe starting a small horse ranch in a few years. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink, Daniel pulled Sarah into his lap. "Are you happy?" he asked. Sarah thought about it, really thought. She'd been betrayed, abandoned, hunted. She'd lost everything she'd known and run into the wilderness with no plan and no hope. She'd been terrified and broken and desperate. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found this: a man who saw her as an equal, a home that was truly hers, a life built on love rather than obligation. She'd found strength she didn't know she possessed, and a future that belonged to her. "Yes," she said, turning to kiss him. "I'm happy. Are you?" Daniel's arms tightened around her. "I spent 5 years alone in these mountains, thinking I'd never trust anyone again. Then you stumbled into my life in a torn wedding dress, offering me gold for shelter. And now," gestured to the garden, the expanded cabin, the life they'd built. "Now I have everything I never knew I needed." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder and watched the sun sink behind the peaks. Somewhere far below, in the world they'd left behind, church bells might be ringing for other brides, other promises. But here in the high country, the only sound was the wind through pines and the steady beat of Daniel's heart beneath her cheek. She'd been betrayed beneath the church bell, but the mountain man had called her his own, and in doing so, had given her the greatest gift of all, the freedom to become who she was always meant to be. Together, the first winter after their marriage was harsh but beautiful. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and there were weeks when they couldn't venture beyond the clearing. But Sarah didn't mind. She'd learned to love the isolation, the way the world narrowed to just the two of them, and the steady work of survival. It was during one of those snowbound weeks that Sarah first felt the nausea. She woke before dawn, her stomach churning, and barely made it outside before she was sick in the snow. Daniel found her there, shivering in her nightgown, and carried her back inside with worry etched across his face. "You're burning up," he said, pressing his hand to her forehead. "How long have you felt ill?" "Just this morning." Sarah's stomach rolled again, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. "It must be something I ate." But it wasn't something she ate. The nausea came again the next morning, and the morning after that. Sarah watched Daniel's concern grow, saw him counting supplies and checking the weather, preparing for a desperate ride to fetch a doctor despite the snow. It was on the 4th morning, when Sarah realized her monthly courses were late, that understanding dawned. She sat by the fire, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face. Daniel found her there and dropped to his knees in front of her chair. "Sarah, please, tell me what's wrong. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Daniel went very still. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor." Sarah couldn't read his expression. "Daniel, I know this isn't what we planned. We talked about waiting, about building the ranch first." Sorry." "Sorry?" Daniel's voice cracked. He took her face in his hands, and she saw tears in his dark eyes. "Sarah, you're carrying our child. Our child. Why would you be sorry?" I thought you might be angry." "Angry?" He laughed, the sound wet with emotion. "I'm terrified. I'm thrilled. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm going to be a father." Sarah felt his whole body trembling against hers. "You're not upset? How could I be upset?" Daniel pulled back to look at her, his hands moving to rest gently on her stomach. "You've given me everything, Sarah. A home, love, a purpose. And now this? A family?" His voice broke. "I never thought I'd have a family." They held each other by the fire, and Sarah felt the last of her fear dissolve. She'd been so focused on her own terror of childbirth, of responsibility, of bringing a child into their hard life, that she hadn't considered what this would mean to Daniel. A man who'd lost his sister, who'd spent years alone, who'd built walls around his heart until she'd stumbled into his clearing. "We're going to need a bigger cabin," she said finally. Daniel laughed again, this time with pure joy. "We're going to need a lot of things. A cradle, baby clothes, medical supplies." He stood and began pacing, his mind already working through logistics. "We should move down to the settlement before you're too far along. Find a midwife. Make sure you have help when the time comes." "Daniel, slow down." Sarah caught his hand as he passed. "We have time. The baby won't come until late summer, early fall. We don't have to leave the mountains." "But what if something goes wrong? What if you need help and I can't?" Fear flickered across his face. Sarah understood. He was thinking of Mary, of all the women who died in childbirth, of everything that could go wrong. "Then we'll face it together," she said, echoing his earlier words. "But I'm strong, Daniel. The mountains made me strong, and we'll be careful." They compromised. Daniel would ride to the settlement once the passes cleared and bring back a midwife, an older woman named Martha, who lived alone and was known for her skill with difficult births. She could stay with them through the summer and fall, help with the delivery, and teach Sarah what she needed to know. In the meantime, Daniel became almost comically protective. He wouldn't let Sarah chop wood or haul water. He fussed over her meals, making sure she ate enough. At night, he'd talk to her growing belly, his deep voice rumbling through her as he told their unborn child about the mountains, about survival, about love. "You're going to be a wonderful father," Sarah said one night, her fingers threading through his hair as his head rested on her stomach. "I'm going to try." His hand spread across her belly, protective and tender. "I want to give this child everything I never had. Safety, love, the freedom to choose their own path." "We will," Sarah promised, together. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers, and Sarah's belly began to round noticeably. She spent her days working in the garden, while Daniel prepared for the baby's arrival. He built a beautiful cradle from pine, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. He rode to the settlement and returned not just with Martha the midwife, but with bolts of soft fabric, yarn for knitting, and a precious bottle of laudanum in case the birth was difficult. Martha was a weathered woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and capable hands. She examined Sarah thoroughly, asked pointed questions, and finally pronounced her healthy and strong. "Baby's positioned well," Martha said. "Should be a straightforward birth, barring complications. But you," she pointed at Daniel, "you need to stay calm when the time comes. I've seen strong men faint at the sight of their wives in labor." "I won't faint," Daniel said firmly. Martha snorted. "They all say that." Sarah liked Martha immediately. The older woman had lost her own family to cholera years ago and had been living alone ever since. She was practical, no nonsense, but there was a kindness beneath her gruff exterior. She taught Sarah about positioning for labor, about breathing through contractions, about the signs that something might be wrong. "Your man loves you fierce," Martha observed one afternoon while they sat shelling peas. "Doesn't take his eyes off you for more than a minute." Sarah smiled, watching Daniel work on expanding the cabin to include a separate room for the baby. "He does. You're lucky. Not every woman gets that." Martha's hands stilled. "My husband was a good man too. We were going to have 6 children, fill up a whole house with noise and laughter. Only got one, and he died with his father." Sarah reached over and squeezed the older woman's hand. "I'm sorry. Life's hard," Martha said simply. "But you take the good when you can get it. And you've got good here, girl. Don't ever forget that." Summer deepened, and Sarah's belly grew heavy. She moved more slowly now, her back aching, her feet swelling in the heat. But she'd never felt more alive. She loved feeling the baby move inside her, loved watching Daniel's face light up when he felt a kick beneath his palm. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching another spectacular sunset, Daniel turned to her with unusual seriousness. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you before, but I was afraid." Sarah's heart clenched. "What is it?" "My real name isn't Daniel Cross." He looked down at his hands. "It's Daniel Crow. I changed it when I came to the mountains, because I didn't want to be found. My father, he's still alive, as far as I know, and he's the kind of man who holds grudges." "What did you do?" "I testified against him in a land dispute after I left the army. He'd stolen property from a widow, forged documents to claim it was his. I was the only one willing to speak up." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He lost the case, lost the land, swore he'd kill me if he ever saw me again." Sarah absorbed this, her hand moving protectively to her belly. "Do you think he'll come looking for you?" "I don't know. But with the baby coming," Daniel's voice roughened, "I needed you to know. Needed you to understand why I'm always watching the tree line, why I keep the rifle loaded. I'm not just being cautious. I'm being careful." "Then we'll both be careful," Sarah said firmly. "And if he comes, we'll face him together." But summer passed without incident, and Sarah began to believe they were truly safe. Her due date approached. Martha calculated it for early September, and everyone went on high alert. Daniel barely left the clearing. Martha prepared her supplies. Sarah nested, organizing and reorganizing the baby's small room until everything was perfect. The contractions started on a cool September evening, just as the sun was setting. Sarah was washing dishes when the first pain gripped her belly, making her gasp and grab the edge of the table. Daniel was beside her instantly. "Is it time?" "I think so." Sarah breathed through the contraction, remembering Martha's teachings. "But it's early yet. First babies take a while." Martha confirmed it when she examined Sarah. "You've got hours ahead of you, girl. Best get comfortable." What followed was the longest night of Sarah's life. The contractions came in waves, growing stronger and closer together. Daniel stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. "You're doing so well," he said, his voice steady, even though Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. "You're so strong." "It hurts," Sarah gasped as another contraction peaked. "Daniel, it hurts so much." "I know, love, I know. But you're almost there. Just keep breathing." Martha was a constant, calm presence, checking Sarah's progress, adjusting her position, knowing exactly what to do and when. As dawn broke and the contractions became almost unbearable, Sarah looked up at Daniel with tears streaming down her face. "I can't," she sobbed. "I can't do this anymore." "Yes, you can." Daniel's face was close to hers, his eyes locked on hers. "You're the bravest person I know. You ran into these mountains alone. You survived winter. You chose love over fear. You can do this." "Together," Sarah whispered. "Together," Daniel agreed. When Martha finally said it was time to push, Sarah bore down with all her strength, screaming through the pain. Daniel supported her back, his own face pale with strain, and Sarah knew he was suffering with her, feeling every moment of her agony. And then, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, there was a new sound in the cabin, a baby's cry. "It's a girl," Martha announced, her voice thick with emotion. A healthy baby girl. Sarah collapsed back against Daniel, sobbing with relief and joy and exhaustion. Martha cleaned the baby quickly and placed her on Sarah's chest, a tiny, perfect creature with a shock of dark hair and Daniel's eyes. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "Sarah, she's perfect." Sarah looked down at her daughter, their daughter, and felt her heart expand in a way she'd never imagined possible. This small, squirming bundle was theirs, a new life, born of love and choice and courage. "What should we name her?" Daniel asked, his finger gently stroking the baby's impossibly small hand. Sarah thought of her mother, of the woman who'd taught her about herbs and kindness and strength. "Mary," she said softly, "for your sister. Mary Rose." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "You do that? She should know where she comes from, the good and the hard." Sarah looked up at him. "Your Mary would have loved her." Daniel bent and kissed Sarah's forehead, then the baby's. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for choosing me, for giving me this family, for making me believe in good things again." Mary Rose Cross, or Crow, Sarah supposed, if they ever used Daniel's real name, nursed for the first time while the sun rose over the mountains. Martha fussed around them, cleaning up, making sure Sarah was comfortable. Daniel sat beside the bed, unable to take his eyes off his wife and daughter. "I was so afraid," he admitted. "All night I kept thinking about everything that could go wrong, about losing you, about—" "But you didn't lose me," Sarah interrupted gently. "I'm here. We're all here. A family." "A family," Daniel repeated, as if testing the word. Then he smiled, and it transformed his usually serious face. "We're a family." Martha stayed for another month, teaching Sarah how to care for Mary Rose, making sure she was healing properly. The older woman was remarkably gentle with the baby, singing old lullabies and telling stories of her own son. When it came time for her to leave, there were tears. "You come visit in the spring," Martha ordered, hugging Sarah carefully. "I want to see how big this little one's gotten." "We will," Sarah promised. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." After Martha left, Sarah and Daniel settled into their new rhythm as parents. The baby was demanding, crying at all hours, needing constant feeding and changing. But there was joy in every moment, even the exhausting ones. Daniel was a natural father, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he cradled Mary Rose, singing to her in his deep voice. Sarah watched him one evening, rocking the baby by the fire, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She'd thought her life was over that day beneath the church bell. She'd thought betrayal and pain were all she had left. But she'd been wrong. She'd found something better than the fairy tale she'd imagined with Thomas. She'd found something real, a love built on respect and partnership, a family forged through choice and courage. Mary Rose was 3 months old when the stranger came. Sarah was outside hanging laundry while Daniel chopped wood nearby. Mary Rose dozed in a basket in the shade, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. It was a perfect autumn day, the aspens turning gold against the deep green pines. The first sign of trouble was the way the birds suddenly went quiet. Daniel's head came up instantly, his hand moving to the rifle he always kept within reach. Sarah followed his gaze to the tree line and saw a figure on horseback emerging from the shadows. The man was old, probably in his 60s, but still powerfully built, with iron gray hair and a face weathered by hard living and harder choices. He rode with the confidence of someone who'd spent his life taking what he wanted. Daniel moved to stand between the stranger and his family, the rifle in his hands. "That's far enough," he called out. The stranger reined in his horse, studying Daniel with cold blue eyes. Then he smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "Hello, boy," the man said. "Been looking for you for 5 years now." Sarah felt ice flood her veins. This was Daniel's father. It had to be. "You're not welcome here," Daniel said, his voice flat. "Turn around and leave. That's no way to greet your old man." The stranger dismounted, moving with a predatory grace despite his age. "I heard rumors. A mountain man named Cross living up here." "Cross, Crow, not much difference, is there? Took me a while to track you down, but I always was persistent." "Leave," Daniel repeated. "Now." The stranger's eyes slid past Daniel to Sarah, then to the basket where Mary Rose was starting to fuss. His smile widened. "Well now, looks like you've built yourself a nice little life up here. Pretty wife, new baby, cozy cabin. Shame if something were to happen to it." Sarah felt fear spike through her, but alongside it came something else, anger. This man had hurt Daniel, had driven him into the wilderness, had made him afraid to even use his own name. And now he was threatening her daughter. She moved to the basket and picked up Mary Rose, holding her protectively. "You need to leave," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "This is our land, our home. You're not wanted here." The stranger laughed. "Got yourself a fiery one, boy. She anything like that Indian girl you were sweet on back in Kansas? The one who—" "Don't!" Daniel cut him off, his voice dangerous. "Don't you dare speak of her." "Sensitive subject?" The stranger took a step closer. "Here's the thing, Daniel. Or should I call you Danny, like when you were a boy? I came all this way for a reason. That land you cost me, that widow's property, it's worth 10 times what it was back then. Railroads coming through. And I figure you owe me." "I don't owe you anything." "See, I disagree." The stranger's hand moved toward his belt, and Sarah saw the gun holstered there. "I figure you owe me about 5 years of income, plus interest, plus payment for the humiliation of having my own son testify against me." Daniel's knuckles were white on the rifle. "I testified because you stole from a woman who just lost her husband. Because you forged papers and lied under oath. You did that to yourself. Boy, everything I did was for our family, to build something, to make a name for ourselves. But you always were weak, just like your mother, just like your sister. Couldn't stomach what it takes to survive in this world." "No," Daniel said quietly. "I couldn't stomach hurting innocent people for profit. And I won't start now. So I'll say it one more time. Leave. If you're gone by the time I count to 10, I'll let you right away. If not," he raised the rifle, "I'll defend my family." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "You'd shoot your own father? To protect them?" Daniel glanced back at Sarah and Mary Rose. Without hesitation. For a long moment, The two men stared at each other. Sarah held her breath. Her daughter clutched to her chest. She could feel Mary Rose's small heart beating against hers, could see Daniel's shoulders tight with tension. "This isn't over," the stranger finally said. "I know where you live now. I know about your wife, your baby. You can't watch them every second, Danny. Accidents happen in these mountains." "One," Daniel said. "Think about what you're doing, boy. I'm your blood." "Two." The stranger's face flushed with anger. "You'll regret this." "Three." Finally, the man mounted his horse. But before he rode away, he looked at Sarah directly. "You chose wrong, girl. That boy's bad blood, always has been. He'll bring you nothing but grief." "He brought me love," Sarah said clearly, "and family, and home. That's more than you ever gave anyone." The stranger spat in the dirt, then turned his horse and disappeared into the trees. Daniel didn't lower the rifle until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then his shoulders sagged, and Sarah saw him start to tremble. She went to him immediately, wrapping her free arm around his waist while Mary Rose squirmed between them. "He found me," Daniel said, his voice hollow. "After all this time, he found me." "And we sent him away," Sarah said firmly. "Together. But he'll come back. You heard him. He threatened you, threatened Mary Rose." Daniel's hand came up to cradle the back of the baby's head. "I won't let him hurt you. I won't let him anywhere near our daughter." "Then we'll be ready." Sarah guided him inside the cabin, settling Mary Rose in her cradle before turning to face her husband. "Daniel, look at me." He met her eyes, and she saw the fear there. The same fear she'd seen the night Mary Rose was born. The terror of losing what he loved most. "We're not helpless," Sarah said. "You've taught me how to shoot, how to track, how to survive. We have supplies. We have weapons. We have each other. And we know he's out there now. We're not caught off guard anymore. He's dangerous, Sarah. He's killed before. I never told you, but I know he has. He'll wait until I'm gone, until you're vulnerable. Then you won't leave me vulnerable." Sarah took his face in her hands. "We adapt. We prepare. We protect what's ours. Isn't that what you've been teaching me all along?" Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm terrified," he admitted against her hair. "Not for myself, for you, for her." "I know," Sarah held him just as tightly. "But we're stronger together than he is alone. We'll figure this out." They spent the rest of the day fortifying the cabin. Daniel reinforced the door and shutters. They moved extra ammunition inside. Along with emergency supplies, they established signals, specific bird calls that meant danger, patterns of movement that meant everything was clear. That night, lying in bed with Mary Rose asleep in her cradle beside them, Daniel spoke into the darkness. "I'm sorry I can't assist with that request. I should take you down to the settlement. Somewhere safe, where there are other people. Where—" "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "This is our home. We don't run anymore. We stand and fight." "Sarah, you gave me the freedom to choose my own path, Daniel. To be strong, to be brave. Now I'm choosing to stay and defend what's ours." She squeezed his hand. Together, in the darkness, Daniel brought her hand to his lips. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Sarah corrected. "We found each other." The weeks that followed were tense. Daniel barely left Sarah's side, always watching, always alert. They saw no sign of his father, but that somehow made it worse. The not knowing, the constant vigilance, wore on both of them. Mary Rose, oblivious to the danger, continued to grow. She smiled now, real smiles, that lit up her whole face. She recognized her parents' voices, would turn toward the sound of Daniel's deep rumble or Sarah's soft singing. Despite everything, she was happy and healthy. "We can't live like this forever," Sarah said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Constantly looking over our shoulders." "I know." Daniel stared into the flames. "But I don't know what else to do. If I go looking for him, I leave you vulnerable. If I try to get the law involved, it's my word against his, and he's always been good at lying." "What if we turn it around?" Sarah said slowly, an idea forming. "What if instead of waiting for him to strike, we make him come to us, on our terms, where we're ready?" Daniel looked at her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we set a trap." Over the next few days, they refined the plan. Daniel would ride to the settlement, make it known he was looking to sell furs and wouldn't be back for 3 days. His father, if he was watching, would see an opportunity. Sarah alone with the baby, vulnerable. He'd come to make good on his threats. But Sarah wouldn't be alone. Daniel would circle back through the mountains, approaching from the opposite direction. And Sarah would be ready. The cabin secured, the rifle loaded. "I don't like this," Daniel said for the 100th time as they prepared. "Too many things could go wrong." "Everything we've done has had risk," Sarah pointed out. "I ran into these mountains not knowing if I'd survive the night. You took in a stranger who could have brought danger to your door. We had a baby in the wilderness. We've faced every challenge together, and we've survived." Daniel pulled her close, careful of Mary Rose sleeping in the sling Sarah wore. "If anything happens to you, it won't." Sarah kissed him. "We're going to end this, Daniel. We're going to take back our peace, our life, our future." The morning Daniel left, Sarah's stomach churned with fear and determination. She watched him ride away, every instinct screaming at her to call him back. But she didn't. Instead, she went inside, barred the door, and checked her rifle one more time. Mary Rose seemed to sense her mother's tension and fussed more than usual. Sarah nursed her, walking the floor of the cabin, singing softly to calm them both. "Your daddy and I are going to keep you safe," she murmured to the baby. "Always." "That's a promise." The stranger came just after noon on the second day. Sarah heard him before she saw him. The creak of a boot on the porch, the scrape of something against the door. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady as she positioned herself behind the table, the rifle aimed at the door. "I know you're in there, girl," the stranger's voice called. "Your husband's gone. It's just you and that baby now. Why don't you open up? I just want to talk." Sarah didn't respond, didn't move. She'd learned patience from Daniel, learned to wait for the right moment. The door rattled. "Come on now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'll break this door down if I have to. And that'll wake the baby. You don't want that." Still, Sarah waited. In her sling, Mary Rose was blessedly quiet, as if she understood the need for silence. When the door splintered inward, Sarah was ready. The stranger stepped through with his gun drawn, his eyes adjusting to the dim interior. "Drop the gun," Sarah said clearly, her rifle trained on his chest. "Now." The stranger froze, then slowly smiled. "You're tougher than you look. Danny chose well." "I said drop it." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" He took a step forward. "You're not a killer, girl. I can see it in your eyes. You're probably shaking right now, scared out of your mind." "I am scared," Sarah admitted. "But I'm also a mother, and there's nothing more dangerous than a mother protecting her child." There. Something in her voice must have convinced him, because he carefully set his gun on the floor. There. Happy now? Kick it over here. He did, his eyes never leaving hers. You know what your problem is? You think love makes you strong, but it doesn't. It makes you weak. It gives you something to lose. No, Sarah said. Love makes you brave. It gives you something worth fighting for. The stranger lunged for her. Sarah had a split second to make a choice. Fire the rifle with Mary Rose strapped to her chest, or trust her training. She sidestepped, using the rifle butt to strike him in the side. He stumbled, cursing. And then Daniel was there, crashing through the broken door with his own rifle raised. "It's over, old man," Daniel said, his voice cold. "Stand down, or I end this." The stranger looked between them, his expression calculating. "You won't shoot me, boy. You're not like me. You don't have the stomach for it." "You're right," Daniel said. "I'm not like you. But I will do whatever it takes to protect my family. Last chance. Surrender or face the consequences." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the stranger's shoulders sagged, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite defeat, but close. "You really think you won, don't you?" he said bitterly. "You really think you can just walk away from your blood, build a new life, and everything will be fine?" "Yes," Daniel said simply, "because that's exactly what I did, and I've never been happier." The stranger looked at Sarah, at the baby, at the cabin they'd built. "Maybe you're stronger than I thought. Maybe you're not weak like your mother after all." "My mother was the strongest person I ever knew," Daniel said. "She survived you. That took more strength than anything you've ever done." They bound the stranger and loaded him on his horse. Daniel would take him to the nearest town, turn him over to the marshal for threatening them. It wouldn't keep him locked up forever, but it would send a message. They weren't helpless, and they wouldn't be bullied. Before they left, Daniel came to Sarah and wrapped his arms around both her and Mary Rose. "You were incredible," he said. "Strong and brave and terrified," Sarah admitted. "I was so scared, Daniel." "But you didn't let fear stop you." He kissed her forehead. "Just like you didn't let fear stop you from running into these mountains. Just like you didn't let fear stop you from loving me. You're the bravest person I know." Sarah watched them ride away, Daniel and the father who'd caused him so much pain, and felt something lift from her chest. Not all the fear, not all the wariness, but enough that she could breathe easier. When Daniel returned 3 days later, he found Sarah in the garden with Mary Rose on a blanket beside her, harvesting the last of the fall vegetables. He dismounted and came to her, pulling her into his arms. "It's done," he said. "The marshal has him on charges of trespassing and threatening. Won't stick him in prison long, but he's got warrants in 2 other territories. They'll hold him for a while, and when they let him out, we'll be ready. We're always ready now." Daniel knelt and picked up Mary Rose, holding her against his chest. "But Sarah, I don't think he'll come back. I saw something in his eyes when they took him away. Not quite regret, but recognition maybe. That he'd lost. That his son was stronger than he ever gave him credit for." Sarah leaned against Daniel's side, watching their daughter reach for her father's beard with chubby hands. "We did it," she said. "We protected our family." "We did." Daniel kissed the top of Mary Rose's head. Together. That night, with their daughter asleep between them, Sarah and Daniel made plans for the future. They'd expand the ranch, maybe get horses in the spring. They'd build Mary Rose a treehouse when she was older. Teach her to track and hunt and survive. They'd give her the childhood they'd been denied, full of love and laughter and choice. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. Running away? Leaving civilization behind? Never. Daniel's hand found hers in the darkness. These mountains gave me back my life, and they gave me you. That's worth more than anything civilization had to offer. Sarah thought about the girl she'd been, the one standing beneath the church bell, betrayed and broken, ready to trade her mother's locket for one night of shelter. That girl had been terrified and desperate and certain her life was over. She'd been wrong. Her life wasn't over. It was just beginning. And the mountain man, who'd called her his own, had shown her something more valuable than gold or safety or pretty promises. He'd shown her that love wasn't about ownership or obligation. It was about partnership and respect and courage. It was about choosing each other every day, no matter what challenges came. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, surrounded by her husband's warmth and her daughter's soft breathing, she smiled. The church bells were far away now, ringing for other brides. But here, in the high country, she'd found something better than fairy tales. She'd found home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Sarah and Daniel's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.